to get started. And as you know, Randy has asked us to kind of record one of our Triad things as a way to share with other people what the Triad experience is like. And when I realized the timing of our schedules to get together, wow, did it make perfect sense? Because with this month being Community of Believers, well, here we are, a community of believers. So anyway, just like we always do, there was a lot of material to get through and the Bible study and everything, but is there one particular thing that maybe we can focus down on that you guys think would really speak to the community of believers and the Triad experience? Any thoughts?
Where he talks about how you're formed, how you're discovered, how you're made, and how that continues.
Yeah, it was that audio on spiritual friendships that was inside the community. Did you both get a chance to listen to that? Because I know sometimes we come to these and we haven't quite gotten to everything, but have you guys been able to listen to that one?
I have.
I've listened to that one a couple of times, honestly. In fact, I had just gone through it on my walking my dog a week before we got to this part of the curriculum, and yeah, it was a very powerful impact. I think he changes the word fellowship, that's really what's translated in the text in Acts, to a word that was kind of invented by an English monk, Array de Deveau or Reveau, something like that, to call it spiritual friendship. And I think that's where it has a lot of applications to just our almost 2-year experience now as a triad, trying to figure all this stuff out together. And, so it resonated a lot with me. Yeah,
me too. And so I think for right now, if you guys don't mind, let's just really focus down on that one resource that we had for this month. And I would like to kind of maybe even step through it, because one of the things in the middle, but one of the things that really resonated with me was this whole idea that spiritual friendships are discovered, not made. And then he turns that right around again and says made, not discovered. But before that, he even just talks about, that first step is that commonality of need and want. And I really thought that made a lot of sense because of how the three of us came together through our interest in the fellows program. And while this is year 2 material, we've already been through year 1. So I think we did, didn't we? Didn't we have the common need and want when we came together? And we didn't know each other at all.
No, it's part of the program to get placed into a quad or a triad as part of the first year. But the good thing about that is you've already come together out of a common desire of wanting to learn and be discipled with each other, with the materials, with the program. So there is a focus going one direction. So even though we had no clue who we were, and we were in the midst of COVID and we couldn't even get together in person, the first, I think, 6 or 7 meetings were all virtually, like we're doing right now, actually. But somehow it all came together and it worked pretty fast.
Yeah, I think it did.
Yeah, I know for me that, I'd been a Christian actually 50 years to the date of the start of the program. And I mean, if I look back, for years, I think I had been flying solo from a standpoint of just my own Christian walk and development. And I've had a handful of Christian friends over the years, but I've also experienced so many friendships that have dissolved or disappointed, I guess might be the word. I'd almost convinced myself when we started that it was a great theory. It's a great ideal to have Christian friendships, but I wasn't quite convinced that they were for me or even possible for me. I wanted them, but my experience is that, you put in so much work with a friendship and then people move away, and that's a normal thing, right? But there's other aspects of it, that friends are messy, that sometimes they involve a lot of time. You work very, very hard at the friendship, and then for whatever reason, they disappoint you, they hurt you. They can also break your heart. And so it's not exactly like, oh boy, here we go. I'm going to jump in with two people that I don't know, and this is going to work. I think it was a little bit like, well, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. Well, and I think a couple of things that you touched on there, Brian, makes sense to me because I read the book and follow the rules, when I read that it was going to be, the expectation was once a month, 60 to 90 minutes. And then we had the layer of COVID on it. I was like, seriously, an hour and a half with, people that I don't know yet. And at the same time, the other thing that I thought was so important, what Tim Keller said, was that need and that want, it comes from a place of health. It's a healthy need and want. It's not looking for those long-lasting spiritual friendships, not looking at it from a place that there's something wrong or something like that. It's like a really healthy desire to really dig into this body of work, because there is a lot there and a commitment to that. And that's what that need or want. And frankly, I think we were so good for each other in that we did follow the rules, but if, we'd talk about all kinds of things, and sometimes it'd be an hour and sometimes it would be the 90 minutes, and then I'd remind us that when we started out, we were 4 people. We were a quad, and they were assigned to us. And so and the timing for our 4th person was not a good timing, but we worked through that with the 4th person as well. And we were able to keep going. Again, it was that need and that want and that timing and everything. I think that was that first step for me anyway.
Yeah, I would just say, from looking back on the beginning of this, that there were a lot of things working against of the friendship that eventually did develop, right? I think we can all admit that, we started in COVID. Here's 3 people that really are strangers. We're not able to meet for, I think it was at least 8 months. That, we were all out of our comfort zone a bit.
Yeah.
And I think to a certain extent that brought us together. I think to a certain extent, the adversity really drew us together spiritually and also friendship wise. And so in retrospect, I'm happy that it worked out the way it did, just with the things that we had to overcome. And I think a lot of it was just that we just chose to stay, kind of hang out and see how it worked out. And looking back, I wouldn't have missed it. It was a great ride.
Yeah, I think all of us had thought about coming into the C.S. Lewis Institute for a period of years. It wasn't like we found it, we applied, and then we started like within weeks of each other. There was a certain sense we saw how good the material was and what we wanted out of it, that we weren't going to we stuck to the process. And in that, I think we discovered early on, we discovered a richness of faith and trust and fellowship with each other that allowed the group to go deeper levels than just the requirement.
Yeah, no, well said, Rick, and good segue, by the way. You said discovered, you said that we discovered that, and we did. And I think that part of the beginning formation of just that, it's like, the different ways. I knew pretty quickly that I could text you guys and say, I can't find this. Or I could reach out and say, I'm not understanding. And we could do that, I think, fairly quickly with each other. And I think that that's part of, when Keller's talking about spiritual friendships, he says, he was saying that they were discovered, they were just not made. And I love, again, how we know the foreshadowing, because we've been through it, what his next step is. But I think for me, part of that discovery was the fact of how the material is laid out in year 1 so well, that those first few months, figuring out, my own time management and my own time commitment to this. And I knew you guys were needing to do that too. So your time commitment, my time commitment, that we were figuring it out, I could text you. I could say, look, they've got the, I can't figure this out. They're going to help me because I have a time commitment to it. But also just some of the things, the tapestry of life thing, that was hard for me. That was a hard piece of work for me personally. And then to come right along that, and now it's a spiritual autobiography. Those are things that I hadn't, who goes back and really thinks about, Kansas, in the late 60s, not me, I haven't done that in a long time, but it was so important. But that was me discovering myself again, to have this foundation, but it helped to know that you guys were doing the same thing.
Yeah, that was very true. And I said this to you not too long ago, is that there was a real apparent change at some point in the first year with you, especially Donna Marie, in that you, instead of looking back and trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together about your life history, it was like, okay, it's in the past. I've come to the grace of God that I can actually, I don't have to figure this out. I just know who I am. My identity is not based on my history. It's much bigger than that. So we could see that. I mean, I think we all probably had some of the same experience, of going, okay, we've dealt with the past. Now we need to kind of go forward. How does this material address what's in front of us instead of what's behind us?
No, you're so right. And it was what was so great about you guys. And look at me, I won't cry, just so you know, I'm not going to cry. The thing that was so great about you guys is that sometimes, in trying to work through some things, people will want to pull out more than you're willing to give. It's not quite a safe enough environment. And you guys were safe for me. But the thing of it was, part of that is that you weren't asking me anything that was more to my life than I wanted to share. It wasn't like you were trying to put a Hallmark movie script together. You weren't needling me for things that I didn't want to go to. However, when it related to going through, what is my spiritual foundation, you helped me for that. You would ground me at different places, and you helped me. And it was a very safe place to do that with you guys. Very safe.
No,
Some of that I think has to do with just friendship itself is not really about getting to know somebody's history. It's really more defined about what are you in love with together. And along the way, you discover little quirky things about people, or you do discover their history, or things about them that aren't necessarily the most urgent things to know. And so, I mean, I think in navigating through that, we were all focused in on the same, content, and it was bigger than our histories, right? It was bigger than just some individual path that we've all, had a journey, and it eventually comes out, but it comes out in a very natural way, I think, that way.
Yeah.
I think that's what, when Keller talks about this word discovered or discover, we're discovering, and the materials helps us along the path. But while doing the material, I think the greatest thing is we discovered each other and the commonality, because Donna Marie would see something that was different than what I saw or Brian saw, but it helped the whole picture come together in a greater way, whatever subject we were studying, from grace to salvation to justification to apologetics. The material, yeah, it's important, but it was discovering each other that really formed the spiritual friendship.
Well, and the thing of it is that when, we're all coming together with the desire to deepen those discipleship skills and being able to share our faith with other people, to be able to hear a different viewpoint on it helps, that radar go up, that when somebody from a different viewpoint is sharing a question and they're seeking, it's like, wait a minute, this is kind of what I recall, Rick mentioning. This is what I recall Brian mentioning. So now I get that.
For a minute, I'd like to go back just to the kind of the topic we're on, which is that friendships are needed, spiritual friendships are needed. And I've always thought it's really almost a paradox that Jesus himself surrounded himself with friends, not only the 12, but I mean, the Mary and Martha. And I mean, you see these friendship dynamics all through the New Testament. And, I think at times when you really look at it, his disciples were kind of like that old TV show F Troop. They're loyal, and at times they're inspired, but most of the time they're just, they're misfits. And yet he puts himself into those friendships and makes them extremely important, and all of the things that I was afraid of in terms of friendships, he experienced, right? He experienced the disloyalty. He experienced, in his greatest need, he's in the garden and everybody falls asleep. They walk down after after the transfiguration, and they're arguing about who's the greatest. And at times it is like F Troop. It's like you just want to take your hat off. But he put himself into a place where he said, friendships are really important. You cannot do this on solo. You really need other people in order to sharpen each other. And so, I mean, I thank you guys that we've been able to do that together. I think that's just been one of the big highlights of the whole program to me.
So Rick, I appreciated one of the things that you mentioned about, that it takes work, it was taking work. And I think that and it did. And I think that was like another, when Keller does that thing, discovered, not made, and then he flips it right around and he says, but then those friendships are made, not just stuck in the discovery place. And it's not, you can't just always stay in the place of, hey, I'm auditioning for friends. I think that's your line, Brian, actually. I'm auditioning.
Still auditioning, as a matter of fact. So I have some openings next week.
It's like, you can't stay just in auditioning there, and that's where the work comes in. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, I wrote it down, is that he went ahead and said that the discovery part in taking the work is that you get the raw material. But then I thought it was so poignant that he says, but then you have to move on and you have to share. And you have to be able to share feelings, things, faith, decisions. You have to come up with making decisions together, and then you have to share your time. And I thought that was so interesting, because that is the crux sometimes where friendships fall away, is that people are not ready to share at a certain later, or they're not ready to make a decision together. They don't, there's not that piece. So I just thought that was really interesting that he put those out. And when I looked back on it, when I was reading and I was thinking about us doing this, it was like, what we did, though, that was something, every one of those was something that we went through, because we did have to make some decisions together that were sometimes kind of rough decisions. So anyway, I don't know, get anything from there that sparks with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we're good friends. I think now, if we happen to be stranded on a desert island or something, we would enjoy each other's company. I think there's a level of friendship to that level. But the main part for me is the greatness of the Lewis materials for year 1 and year 2 is that it allowed us the freedom to talk about some of those subjects you talked about, Donna Marie, and almost at a deeper level that you would normally not talk about with people, right, even other Christians. But this really is where spiritual friendship gets into it, because you start to gnaw on to the level at which you're comfortable, but you work through these things at pretty deep levels at times. And we had just some issues throughout the year. I mean, all of us went through things. I mean, I go back a little bit talking about the discovery, but this group was important to me. And these last 2 years have been very time consuming for me in terms of what I was going through in my own life. I was getting ready to retire. I was selling a house. I was buying a house. There were some transitions with my family that were going on. Yet this group was an important group that I was going to carve out and make sure I committed to, which means not just the 90 minutes every month. It meant I was going to do the work because that's what I had promised to do for the group. And that's important because that allowed us to really become deeper and more transparent to each other. That was how the triad came together, as all of us did this sharing and work together.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I hear you saying, Rick, and I totally agree with it, is that friendship is always about something, right? I mean, Lewis was famous about that point, is that, you know, even if it's an enthusiasm, I think he said, for dominoes and white mice, it has to be about something. And for us, what it was about was, you know, sharing this fairly rigorous load of, you know, responsibility to do the work, not just for ourselves, I think is what I'm hearing you saying, but, you know, you did the work and finished it up because of you had a responsibility to a community, a group of other people to do that. I think one of the little bullet points that you mentioned, Ray, earlier involves, it's almost like the therapist hits you over the head with a light bulb and says, oh, you mean friendship is actually going to require that I do something? And in one of those things that he mentioned is it's you need to share your feelings. All right. And already I can just kind of sense my apprehension about that. I'm, you know, here I am, a guy, and somebody asked me to, you know, to share my feelings. Well, that's not going to be necessarily super easy for me. And I think, you know, when we look back on it and assess, yeah, there were tears at times, and some of the things that we had to walk through and just explain and communicate. You know, there's things that we've, I think all of us are far enough along in life, age-wise, and even in our faith, that we've gone through some, you know, some pain, some difficult things. You know, well, whether it's growing up without a father or growing up with parents that loved us but imperfectly, you know, having our spouses and our kids, you know, break our hearts, whatever it might be. There were some times when it was difficult to do that, but I, you know, I'm grateful you guys allowed me to do that. It's not easy for me to do. And, you know, there was a freedom, and there still is within this group, that we can do that.
Well, and no, well said, Brian. And I think the other thing that we were really honest with each other about tiptoeing into some of those things, because, you know, we would, you know, being able to, it was, you know, sometimes I think it was left lucky and sometimes very providential that we would come to our time together, and not all of us had read every single thing, not by far, but one of us had this and one of us had that. And, you know, we could kind of massage that together, but we'd look at the issues to ponder and we'd say, okay, here's 5 or 6 issues to ponder this month. And some of them we'd look at them and we go, oh, let's not do bullet point number 3, you know, not that, please, not that one, you know.
How did that get in there?
That one, you know. And so, you know, we were honest about when we were ready for it. It wasn't, you know, so pressed upon us because we were making the decision with that. And I think that's one of the things that I think one of the things that really works for me with how C.S. Lewis has put all of this together a little bit differently than church, you know, because our churches is another great big huge community of believers, and we do need to be engaged in it, and we are, you know, we are engaged in it. But the thing that's a little bit different to me in church is I think sometimes by design and maybe by necessity, maybe more than design, when people arrive at, you know, into the foyer from the parking lot on, how those groups come together, it's like, well, what age are you? You know, do you have children? You know, what age are your children? You know, what's your marital status? What's your gender? And some of those tags then are what defines, well, this Bible study is a women's Bible study from this age to this age, and on and on. And one of the things that I found that sometimes showing up, it was very hard for me to jump to, back to Keller's word, to even discover who those people were or try to make those friendships, because so often those groups, it didn't match anything else in my life. It certainly didn't match up with what my workaday world is. And I had such a strong desire, to your point, Rick, I think we all knew of the material. We came to it with very specific reasons of why we were ready to do it. For me, is that I want to have a better way to articulate my faith on the job. And my faith on the job doesn't look like where sometimes church groups want to put me. You guys look, I mean, the mix of the fact that I'm female with a couple of, smart guys, that looks more like my world. And you guys have been able to give me better insight for me to be that salt and light in the world, because I can hear it from you. So I really appreciate your patience and with me on that. That's been really big for me.
Well, we've never really talked about it, but I think the dynamic of two guys and a girl is pretty interesting, right? I bet if I took a poll with my Christian and non-Christian friends, male friends, and said, so what are the chances this is going to work? They would say, dude, it's going to be over in a week, right? How does that work with two guys and a woman? And here we are 2 years later, right? So it's all about results. It did work. But why it worked is more interesting to me than in fact that it did. And I think it's because these spiritual friendships transcend everything. They transcend race, they transcend gender, they transcend marital status, they transcend age. It should be a great freedom for us to know that if we pursue spiritual friendships, if we're all facing that, worshiping that same thing, they're in love with that same thing, that these relationships there's a bond that happens despite the fact that it never should happen. The only place these kind of friendships happen, guys, is right here. They don't happen anywhere else.
Yeah. No, well said. Well
The
said.
fellows program, one of the uniquenesses from the attraction that I found was, and it truly has become a reality in my life, it's the best program that combines the mind and the soul together, the academic part. And if you want to understand where the discipleship part or that soul part, it is really found in this triad or quad. That's what it has been for me. You're not going to get the full program unless you commit to doing this part of it. It's not just taking the C.S. Lewis fellowship books 1, 2, or the life, faith, and writings of C.S. Lewis, whatever you might be studying. It's not just taking that off a shelf and then reading that all together. That's not the program. The program is doing that and then interacting at the monthly meetings. But I think even more importantly for me is in the triad meetings.
Yeah, no. Really well said. And I was going to grab something for my book and I can't find it. So I will let that go. But it is that was exactly the heart of the founders, for that to exist, and they knew it. And so I do think that for people that are trying to figure out, is it okay to skip over this part of it? Kind of, no, really. Yeah. It's part of the time commitment. Absolutely. One of the things that I thought was really cool with the way of the steps that Keller has it is just noting that how many times Paul was always saying goodbye. He was just always saying goodbye. And in different times and depending on what it was, some of them were church plants, but some of them weren't. They were brand new to him. And so he had a very short time for those spiritual friendships to develop. And Paul could even go. I thought it was so poignant with how Keller did that and talked about in that always saying goodbye, and what makes up the forever side of spiritual friendships different than the non-spiritual friendships? What is that key thing that we know that we can feel that forever? I mean, okay, you guys, we've been together for 2 years and I know you feel like that's been forever, but I don't think that's what.
Will this triad never end, right?
This is a triad that never ends. It's a song that just goes on. But we've not had a gap in our work. really. But I think what Keller is talking about, that there are, what is that difference though, when there is the gap, when there is the separation, and you do know what that for forever, and you can hold on to that and what the anchor of that is. I just wondered if you guys had any thoughts about that.
I think Keller's right. When I was kind of musing over this, and one of the things I realized it kind of convicted me as well, I developed a lot of those forever friends when I was in high school and in college. And I can still consider those forever friends, that we had similar, particularly early Christian experiences together, and we developed tight bonds. Since then, I have not as many of the forever friends in and out of churches, raising of kids. I'm not sure I've developed to the level of which, because it goes back to the idea of madeness. There's a certain sense, what you put into something, you get out of it. And I'm convinced now, kind of, Brian threatened, but it won't end, that this, and I'm glad it won't end. I'm hoping our goodbye isn't too soon. I don't want it to be right away, but I know that, if I'm traveling over I-90, I can call you even if the connection's bad and talk about something. So I'm really pleased at that. I was a little saddened that maybe I should have done more of forever friends more in my life, but I'm glad this has occurred.
Yeah.
One of the things that we all know is that we can't control friendships, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we can't control the circumstances of a friend who is, for good reason, they're moving to the East Coast and now we don't see them for 20 years. Or that, they get married, or, whatever change of life. We don't have any control over that. But, and I'm no philosopher, but I just think anecdotally, there's something that happens when we're reunited with those friendships that are spiritually based. They are different. There is a kind of an immediate, like, oh, this is great to be back together again. I did this event. I went to an event about 2 months ago, and I actually ran into a whole bunch of my old Young Life friends, and some where I'd spent quite a bit of time, and there was just that sense that we just started where we left off, and I know that could be with a secular friendship, a non-Christian friendship. It could exist, but it just doesn't seem like anecdotally it exists nearly as much as those relationships. So I think that may be the reason that there wasn't this hysterical goodbye session, Donna Marie, when Paul was on the beach, because he knew he would see these people again, right?
Exactly. He would see them again no matter what. It's almost as if it's see you later, and the see you later might be on this earth, but it certainly will be, in kingdom work when we all come together again. And so that's why there isn't the remorse, there isn't the sadness for it, is that it really is a see you later, and that parting of the ways, because there's still that commonality there. And because there's that commonality, and because there is that mission, because there is that desire, that no matter where you go, when you're up against something again, you have that bond, you have that foundation to be able to say, hey, Rick, long time, haven't heard from you. Are you still in Pullman? Has Pullman grown any? I mean, you and a couple of.
It's growing as we speak.
Oh, as we speak. Okay, good to know. But it's that way that you can connect right back together again. And I think that's his point. And I mean, even in this program, it was a definite experience for me. I mean, Randy and we worked together years and years ago. I knew of his work inside of C.S. Lewis when it was being established here in Seattle. And in our workaday world, he and Marcia moved, and I went on with life. And sure, you see each other on Facebook, but we weren't corresponding. But I remember it was on a call with you guys, and it was like, do you see who's going to be, coming and speaking at our year 1 graduation? It was Randy. And I was like, what a great guy. This is going to be exciting to hear him. And it was. And then the next things happen, the next thing happens. But that's to me a real example of exactly how when God is in it, and his timing is so important of how he brings us back together at different times for his work, for his purposes. That's part of why there is so much need for deep spiritual friendships, so that he can do his work. He can do his work in our communities and in his kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, we're all trying, we all realize, I think we're all, as kind of created human beings in God image, this idea that you kind of implied, Brian, that even just earthly friends, non-Christian friends, can have some of the connectivity again once you see them. But in reality, if we're talking about threads that tie us together, by far the thread that holds us tightest is our relationship with Jesus Christ, and that relationship is with each other through Jesus Christ, and that is the strongest now, and it will be the strongest forever. And that's the forever part of it. It doesn't matter if that we all now live in the Northwest, that we've all are about the same age. Those things are going to fall apart. The unity in Christ is going to remain forever. That's the forever part of the forever.
Yeah, well said.
At the very end, when Jesus was hours from on the cross, and you read John 17, you start to get an insight as to what was on his mind. And, it wasn't about himself, it was about us. And so, I mean, you think about friendship, you think that's the greatest friend we'll ever have.
Right. That's
at that moment, what's on his mind is not himself, it's us.
Yeah. And in John after that, he calls the disciples friends, which is
very good.
Yeah. So
All right.
As always, I always learn so much from you guys, and I appreciate your time. I know that that we have such a desire that others experience what we've experienced, and it's so possible when God is in it, and when there is that commitment and accountability and on and on. It is so possible.
I am convinced now, Donna Marie, that this should be a podcast, and we should go.
Good to know.
Triad Podcast, this is Rick. What's your question?
Got it.
Here he is. He's coming in. We'll have to tease him for being 2 minutes late watching the mirror.
There you go.
You guys already got this done?
We're done.
No, we are not done at all. But we are recording, so I can
Watch it. She'll use this on the internet against us, Brian. So.
Yeah, this is the part in the Lord of the Rings where Frodo knows he's doomed, right?
Yeah.
If you're going along and you kind of go in your brain in the moment and you say, boy, I wish I could start over. Guess what? You can.
Or just keep on talking.
You can give yourself a 1-2 count and take a breath and
you go like this.
Yeah, no, I don't have one of those. I don't have one. I mean, yes, I do own one of those, but not here. So.
Okay.
So I'm kind of laughing, chuckling about your story, Donna Marie, when Marty did the movie. What was his big line?
Preach it, brother.
Yeah. That's going to be my contribution today. So even the smallest of lines can be screwed up.
So you had the donkeys and the cows. You know where this is going.
We're gonna mingle stories. Let's just put them. It's a mashup. It's a mashup, an early mashup.
A mashup back in the, what would it have been, the late 60s. As kids, but you know, we didn't laugh because we knew if we laughed, we would still be sitting with our parents to this very day. So
Right.
we did not laugh. We didn't.
That's right. God has no sense of humor, right?
Exactly.
The story doesn't translate that well in terms of, you know, and he kept asking, well, what happened to Jesus? Well, they put him on a cross and they put nails through his hands and he died. And the little boy just sat there for like 10 seconds and goes, well, what the heck did they do that for?
Great question. Great question.
Was that the same kid that said we don't have Jesus in our church? Or
Yeah, that was my granddaughter. Then he goes off on all these things about, they're probably bad about Seattle. And then he goes, now my granddaughter's 12. And he goes, I'm never gonna leave Arizona again. And she goes, maybe that's a good idea.
Yes, that is a good idea. Yeah. That's
Funny.
And my
Well,
Do you,
Yeah.
do you
Anyway,
promise? Right?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
promise?
works for me, you know.
I
Yeah.
think I don't know how to say this, but I'll just say it. Let Donna do her magic with the wand.
Hey, I'm so glad you mentioned F Troop. I think I would have said Gilligan's Island, but you know, that's
F Troop will actually be in the curriculum next year,
good to know. Good to know.
seasons
Right.
1 and 2.
My favorite scene from F Troop was the guy couldn't figure out how to fold a map. So he sent away to get a cattle brochure on how to fold a map, but it was folded just like a map. That was classic, right? Cut this out.
High level TE. You guys didn't
Yeah.
think I'd bring something into that. Oh, but
That's
equilibrium, I guess. Just, oh yeah, we've discovered that too.
Okay.
You better be careful. Maybe dogs are going to be in charge. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
Right, well,
that's year 4.
I'm so confused.
I think those were good additions. So use them, Donna. Come on now, Donna.
Well, I was always told that you can tell a lot about a person by looking at their garage, right?
Yeah.
Open up their garage and go, oh, did you just move? No, we've lived here 4 years.
You got to. This is off track, but you got to come and look at my garage. The trouble right now is my wife.
I was always attentive to my garage because at some point I knew I might have to live there.
Very
Okay.
good.
That's enough said.
Good,
Don't
brother.
cry.
Sorry for the commercial, Donna.
No.
You should, you could make a really funny reel just to send to like internal, like the broadband.
And you think I won't? Sorry, I'm gonna cut myself here.